This occurred about 20 years ago when I was in my early 20s. I worked at a bar part-time. It wasn't usually a super busy bar, but it was long. So frequently we had two bartenders working and we did gossip about some customers. It was also frequently by more regular than the random kind of customers. The closing bartender was never alone. The regulars that would stay until close and make sure one door was locked before leaving through the other door, with that being locked behind them. We also had a guy that worked when the bar was closed cleaning and stocking things. There was a rare regular that would come in every few off weeks. His name was Al. He was probably 40s, balding, glasses and absolutely all the looks that would blend into the masses, generally very plain. The first time I served him, he was quiet, yet the whole time he was there, hour maybe, he stared at me, giving me this incredible creepy feeling, like he was a serial killer or worse. But I have an overactive imagination. I talked to the bartenders that have been there longer. They all got a creepy feeling at first, but he was shy and a fairly nice guy, although one bartender that was no longer there always had that creepy feeling, but it was only a feeling. So the next few times he comes in and things aren't as bad, he still stares and I wish he would sit on the other side, but it's tolerable small talk and he usually has a couple of drinks and only there for an hour. The other bartenders and regulars know I don't feel comfortable with Al. Of course, they like to watch for amusement. They all know he is staring in that undressing you with my eyes kind of way, but he never says anything really creepy. Well, one night he came in a little later than normal. He has the normal 2 drinks, and things are pretty normal, if being stared at is normal. Then he orders an unusual 3rd drink. It is much closer to the time that the other bartenders can leave. It is my closing shift. As I set his drink down, he says, "Can I ask you a question?" I tell him to go for it. "Do you like me?" I am now very uncomfortable, but trying for the easiest letdown, I respond, "Well, yeah, I like you as a friend." "No, you like me more than that, you just don't know it." "Wait, what?" "No, I don't like you like that." I walked over to the other bartender and told her. She stayed until he left. I didn't make any eye contact and ignored him the rest of that 3rd drink. But even at the other side of the bar, I could feel that creepy stare turn to if looks could kill. So that night, my closing regulars took extra care on checking for lurkers outside and would call if they saw anything unusual. The night guy made sure I was able to check my car before getting inside and was pulling out of the parking lot before actually locking the door. He didn't return the rest of the time that I worked there. If I remember this correctly, the bartender that was working when I picked up my final paycheck said he stopped in right after my last night. Glad I missed that meet. This happened about a year ago. I work at a dollar store and a creepy guy would always come in and talk to my co-worker. He always seemed nervous and rambled on about weird shit. He obviously liked her. After she would check him out, he would linger by her register for a few minutes, just standing there staring at us do our work. Eventually he would leave. There was a long period of time, maybe about 6 months, where he stopped coming in. We obviously didn't care, but then we saw something in a news article. He was arrested for child pornography and child molestation. What he said to the police made me fucking cringe. He said, "Some men have their drugs and alcohol. I have my kids." He started coming back in the store after his short sentence, but I haven't seen him in a while. I hope he moved. I don't want to say I hope he's in prison again, because that would mean he took away the innocence of yet another child. So, creepy child molester who would stalk my co-worker, please, let's not meet. I decided to stay in my college city between my junior and senior year to intern and wait tables to help save money. I would intern Monday from 7 till 2 and then wait tables from 4 till 10. My internship was only a mile from my apartment, so I would walk there and then get a ride with a co-worker to my waiting job. But I will never forget the day that I was followed. It started out like any other day. I woke up early and walked to my internship, which only took about 20 minutes. The day seemed to be dragging, and when it hit 2, I was excited to head home and eat lunch. I thought I would just have enough time for a quick nap before heading to the country club. I grabbed my things and headed outside. Traffic was pretty steady, and I was waiting to cross the one-way street when I saw a dark green car with peeling paint and dirty windows. Finally, a break in the cars opened up and I jogged across the street. I walked 1 block and saw the dark green car coming my way, which was weird because this was another one-way street going in the opposite direction, which meant this car pulled a U-turn, essentially. I knew I had just seen this car a minute ago. That's when the guy pulled off to the side of the road right in front of me and got out of his car while I was crossing the street. He walked in a wide semicircle so that now I was in between him and his car, and he began bombarding me with questions. How's your day? It's pretty warm outside, isn't it? Did you braid your hair yourself? Where are you going? The hair started standing on the back of my neck and my heart was racing. Something just felt off. I'm a small woman and I'm pretty used to having men ask me questions and harass me while I walk the street. But this was different. He was closing in on me and he wasn't giving me any time to process his questions or allowing for any break between them. He had his hand out to shake, and I still don't know why, to this day, that I went to shake his hand. I didn't consciously shake his hand, and it wasn't until my small hand was in his large hand that I realised what was happening. I like your shirt. It's really pretty. It looks good on you. Thanks. Where are you heading? At this point, he had let go of my hand, but he had been continuously walking towards me, and I was walking backwards in the middle of the street. I was always positioned between him and his car. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I knew I had to get out of there. I said, I'm sorry, I have to go, and managed to get fully across the street and walk onto the sidewalk. I was still looking at him though, and walking backwards. You're a waitress, right? At the country club up the road. I panicked. I wasn't in my uniform for the country club, and I was 100% positive that he wasn't a member there. I thought maybe he knew me from my old job working at a sports bar, but I'm pretty good with faces and I would have remembered him. He was about 6'4" with dark hair and had thick rimmed glasses. I would have remembered his face. There couldn't have been any way he knew that I worked as a waitress at the country club, and I doubt that my old bosses would have mentioned it to him if he did know me from the old gig. I'm sorry, I really have to go. I turned around and began fast-paced walking/jogging as fast as I could. I usually took the scenic route home through the old neighbourhoods in the city, but I decided to change it up and take the busiest street I could think of near me. I turned around when I was about half a block down and saw that he was getting into his car. I called my boyfriend at the time to try and calm down, but he was in a work meeting and couldn't answer. I texted him about the guy and I was terrified. I turned right to head to the street that had a playground and a popular restaurant, knowing that I would pass tons of families and people out for a late lunch. I couldn't relax though. I finally reached the busy street and had to wait for a break in traffic to cross the street again. Luckily I was right and there were people everywhere, tons of cars driving by, families at the playground, and people enjoying the weather. I started to relax and look around, trying to convince myself that he must have met me at the sports bar. That's when I saw the dark green car a block away, driving at a snail's pace. He was staring right at me and he had a disgusting smile on his face. We locked eyes for a moment and he sped off. By this point I was only a couple of blocks away from my apartment and I ran. When I finally got into my apartment, I had a panic attack and started crying. My sister's boyfriend was home and I told him what had happened. My hands were shaking and I couldn't breathe. I was paranoid that the guy had followed me home, and then I thought if he knew that I was waitressing at the country club, what if he knew where I lived already? I couldn't calm down, and I didn't sleep soundly for a few weeks after. I didn't see him again while living in this city, and I hope to never meet him again. The only regret I have is not reporting it to non-emergency police, but I figured telling them that I was creeped out wasn't a good enough reason to alert them. I wish I had. This happened about 2 years ago in my old hometown, and this fucking guy is one of the reasons why I'm glad I don't live there anymore. We were out bar hopping with a bunch of my friends and having a really good time. At some point during the night, this dude came up to me and started talking to me, but the music was blaring so loud I couldn't hear him. Not that I really cared what he had to say anyway, and just brushed him off. His logical response to me ignoring him was that he attempted to hug me, so I pushed him away and gave him the "what the fuck man, don't do that" look. He just smiled at me and wandered off. A couple of hours later, we were leaving the club and I was standing outside with one of my friends, waiting for the others to catch up. when that smiling dude showed up again. This time he's talking to my friend, hitting on her, with this almost childlike eagerness and energy. My friend is the quiet and shy type, so she's just glancing at him, stepping away from him every time he leans in to get closer to her. He didn't seem to notice his intrusive charm wasn't working, and kept getting closer and closer to my friend, babbling enthusiastically and God knows what, with that fucking "I smile a lot to hide the fact I enjoy drowning puppies" look on his face. My friend hadn't said a word to him. She was just backing away from him at this point, and it was pretty obvious that she was very uncomfortable but too shy to say anything, so I stepped in. I told him that my friend clearly isn't interested in him and that he should leave her alone. He ignored me, and instead of leaving her alone, he grabbed her by the arm and started violently dragging her away from the bar, still smiling and sort of chanting, "You're coming home with me. You're coming home with me tonight. You're coming home with me now. We are going to have so much fun." Every time he finished a sentence, he yanked her arm harder. My friend was in utter shock, and she was just staring at him with a bewildered look on her face when I grabbed his arm and pushed her away from her. "Get the fuck away from her," I said, and placed myself between them. Within seconds, the joyous smile on his face turned into the ugliest fucking grimace I'd ever had the misfortune of witnessing, and he launched at me. He wrapped his hands around my neck and started choking me, to which I responded by punching him in the face as hard as I could from my awkward position. Luckily, one of my friends had just gotten out of the club, so she saw him attacking me and called for the bouncers. The bouncers ran outside and they had to pry him away from me. There were 2 bouncers holding him and he was still screaming at me, trying to get his hands on me. I noticed that I busted his lip open and he was bleeding everywhere. When the bouncers let him go, he ran down the street and disappeared into the night. He got banned from 2 separate bars that night. Later on, I was talking about what had occurred with a few of my friends, and they had both had their own creepy encounters with him. The other one telling me how he would come into his workplace and pester her all night. She worked night shifts. Eventually it escalated into him standing outside of her window at night, screaming her name and throwing pebbles at her window like some fucked up Prince Charming. I never reported him to the cops because, for some reason, I was afraid I might get into trouble for punching him in the face. I regret not going to the police a little because he obviously has a very disturbing history with women and he isn't afraid to take action. Unfortunately, I ran into him several times after that because it was a small town. I never made eye contact with him though. My sophomore year of high school, my friend was murdered. Going back, freshman year was when I was in homeroom. I became friends with the girl who sat in front of me. Her name was Deanna Wright. We came from the same neighbourhood and both worked at pizza shops a few blocks away. One night I remember she had texted me asking if I wanted to do something. This was before everyone had unlimited cell phone plans. I had the Nokia that was basically a brick, and since I had to pay for minutes, we used to text, and if it was short we could get away with not having to open it and therefore being charged the 0.5 minute. She told me she had a fight with her mom and felt like going out and smoking some weed. I had work and wouldn't be done till we closed up at 1 AM. Since I needed gas money, I told her I couldn't blow off work, but I might come out afterwards. She sighed and said okay, and to text her when I was done to see where she was going to be at because she didn't decide what she was going to do yet. At 1:15 I texted her but I didn't get a reply. No big deal, I thought. She was probably asleep. So, Saturday I texted her. Nothing. Sunday. Nothing. Again, I thought she was probably grounded. That's why she was mad to begin with. She was grounded and went out, got grounded again, left and went out again. Monday I came into school, and I heard the teacher make an announcement. "Sorry to inform you guys, but Deanna is missing. Her family has reported her missing after she left and went out and never came home," the teacher said, in a despondent tone. My stomach dropped. My fingers tingled. I couldn't believe it. Apparently that night, she ended up hanging out with a guy whom she met working at the pizza shop. Everything was going alright. She was a beautiful girl. She was a model. So, we know what he was thinking. We aren't sure in what order things went down. She was drugged, raped, and strangled. Then her vile murderer decided to cut her body into pieces, put her in a steel drum, and light her on fire. I think about that night over and over again. Should I have gone? Would that have really made any difference, or would he just have killed us both? Her father was an FBI agent, So it truly goes to show that if someone is evil and wants to kill you, then nothing, and I mean nothing, will get in their way. So, Lamar Hames, please, let's not meet. My grandmother bought an antique metal comb in a market in Athens back in the 60s. The comb had these striking emerald coloured stones in it. It was old-fashioned comb, and the metal prongs were harsh, so my grandmother never used it. She just put it on her dresser because it was an ornamental and pretty. One morning, not long after she got it, my grandmother noticed there were hairs in the comb. Lots of hairs. On closer inspection, she realised the hairs were hers. She had not used this comb at all. Not once. No one else lived in the house apart from her and my grandfather. My grandfather was nearly bald, even then, so would have no use for the comb. He was a straight-laced, solemn religious sort of guy, so the idea of him combing her hair as a prank or something is absurd to anyone who knew him. She gave the comb away to charity. My wife and I are remodeling a 60-year-old house in a Texas city. There has been a lot of work going on for the past year and a half since we moved here. It has taken a lot just to get the house to feel comfortable, given the conditions of the extensive repairs. But I wanted to share with you some outside elements that have contributed to some uncomfortable and frightening situations. I'd like to preface the events of Wednesday, July 12th, with some interesting happenings. We moved in the end of winter and we're sleeping in a very small guest room to optimize the electric heater. There is a window facing the side of my house, but you can see the road in front of my house at an angle when looking out. All of this covered with some very old yellow blinds. It was approximately 3 a.m. when I suddenly woke up to a man's voice screaming what sounded like my name over and over. Now I suffer from sleep paralysis and oftentimes have auditory hallucinations just before and after waking up. I gave myself a few seconds to make sure what I was hearing was indeed real. It was. With my heart pounding, I slowly crawled out of bed and peeled back 2 of the dusty blinds to stare out onto the street. "Hello? Help me, help me, hello." He was repeating this hello sounding similar to my name. My eyes focused out on the street, which was painted a dirty orange colour from the street lamp. I saw a dark figure power walking down the street, eyeballing my house. He started walking towards my lawn. I ran to make sure my doors were secure and grabbed my prying bar and my phone. I dialed 911 and had my finger on the call button. Now at the front door, I was looking at the people. I could see the man, from the right side of my view, get closer to my lawn as he disappeared out of my sight. Suddenly the screaming stopped. I turned my ear to the silence and was horrified to hear grass and leaves rustling near the front of my house and now right at my front door. The movement and sound stopped. I looked again and saw nothing. I hit 911 and let the operator know with a whisper that someone may need help on my street, or they are attempting to possibly break in. I clutched the prying bar and waited an eternity for the door handle to move or the footsteps to leave, but neither of those things happened. The cops pulled up onto my street and gave them the above story. They found absolutely nobody upon arriving. Fast forward to July 12, 2017. Again, it is about 3 a.m. and I am having trouble sleeping. We sleep in the next room over, and the window is literally right next to the other window described above. The only difference is that it's closer to the street and I have a clear view of my garbage cans below my window. I'm reading about the catacombs of Paris on my phone when I hear rustling around my garbage cans. An animal was my initial thought. Well, the rummaging sounded like it was caused by something particularly large. Also, I could now hear what I can only describe as grunts. I look out the window and see a very large dark shape. This thing is hunkered down and now has completely knocked over a can and is in my trash. At this point I'm confused as well as startled. It honestly looked like a baby black bear cub. I listened and could only hear plastic bags and items moving around with haste. What happened next is hard to put into words, simply for the fact that it horrified me. I decided to scare that animal off. I slowly pulled on the string of the blinds. They raised up as I continued to keep my eye on this animal. I banged on the window. "Hey!" My dogs woke up and went barking. Wife too. Oops. From the garbage, a fully grown man scurried off while hunkered down with a massive limp. He ran into the darkness around the corner. By now, I am completely freaking out after expecting to see a fat skunk or maybe a dog. Of course, it's probably just a homeless person, but it was just a bizarre and frightening experience. So a while back, I had car problems, so I hired rides off this credible site. It wasn't Uber or Lyft. Anyways, I got to talking to this guy and he started telling me how this company pays him. He offered to give me a deal on rides if I pay him in cash. I thought, okay, how different is that from an Uber or anything else? So for a few months, everything was going okay, except that I hated this guy's personality. Like he never shut the fuck up. So when my car got fixed, he asked me for some extra money for gas and time. I said okay since my car is a piece of shit and would probably have to hire him again, but I told him I didn't get paid until Friday. So at 11:56 Thursday night, I get a text from him asking where his money is and when he can come and get it. I didn't answer this text because I didn't know. My check hadn't come through yet. I had to go to the bank first, etc, and work third shift, so I had an odd schedule. So I went home Friday morning and went to sleep. I woke up thinking I could maybe go to the bank on the way to work and have him meet me after work Saturday morning. So I yawn, stretch, look at my phone. 20 fucking text messages, all threatening to take me to court. Come to my house, come to my work. Then he said he had put my name, number, home address and work address online, so quote, weirdos could come after me. I texted him that he is a fucking nutjob and never contact me again, and that if him or anyone comes near me or mine, we will defend ourselves. I live in a rural area and all my neighbours are armed and have dogs and do not take kindly to troublemakers. So that was Friday about 8 PM when I texted him to leave me alone. From 8 PM Friday to 11 AM Saturday, I received over 150 text messages from this guy, literally telling me he will never stop harassing me. He even used Google to text from other numbers and told me that's how he was doing it, so I couldn't block him. I had to file harassment reports with the police where I work and the sheriff where I live. I informed my boss that this guy was threatening to cause trouble at my job. I called the driving company that this guy had worked for and filed a complaint. I'm to the point where let's not meet applies to everyone now. I don't want to meet anyone new, and sure as fuck I'm not letting anyone in my life if I can help it. People are fucked. This story is from 1993. I was a teenager at the time, no more than 13 years old. I guess I want to tell this story because I grew up in the richest county in Michigan, Oakland, in a wealthy city where all the teenagers drove Mustangs to school, so creeps are all over the place, and living in a wealthy suburb guarantees no immunity. My friend Jenny and I were at the bookstore in the mall, 12 Oaks Mall. We were about 13 and our parents had just dropped us off. At this time we were into metaphysical stuff, so we were in the section in the bookstore. I was at one end of the book aisle and my friend was at the other, so we were maybe no more than 10 feet apart. I started reading a book and my friend says, "Nicole, get over here." You gotta understand, I was kind of the pushover in this friendship. Always had to do what Jenny said. I was getting tired of it, so I said, "I will in a minute. I'm reading something." She made a second request and I replied rather bitchy, "Why don't you just come over here?" At her third request, I actually met her gaze and she had a concerned look on her face, so I did walk over. She then told me a guy was looking up my shorts while I was reading with his tongue hanging out. I said who, and she pointed to the guy as he made a beeline out of the bookstore. I was so pissed, I felt violated. I started marching towards the exit of the store and into the mall. I was going to call this guy out and get mall security involved. When you exit the bookstore, there is a pair of escalators to the right, maybe 20-30 feet away. The guy got on the escalator, and just about when I was going to yell and call the guy out, he looked back at me. His eyes were like bug eyes, wild, and the way he looked at me scared the shit out of me. The only way I could describe it was, he looked like he wanted to kill me. Just pure hatred on his face. This happened 24 years ago, but I can bet if I saw this guy in a lineup, I would be able to identify him. I will never forget his face or the way he looked at me. I froze outside of the bookstore as he stared at me the whole time while he took the escalator up. Cold, angry, murderous stare. Before I met his gaze, I was determined to call the perv out, but after I was a shell, I never reported him. I stood there in disbelief. I can guarantee you this guy went on to molest kids and probably murdered some. I still feel guilty for not reporting the guy, but I was a scared teenager. Now I know why the victims of abuse stay silent. There doesn't need to be a verbal threat. Sometimes the way somebody looks at you is enough. I was reminded of a story today and thought this sub would be a great place to tell it. It took place on September 3rd, 2010, according to the pictures on an old Flickr account. I grew up in a rural area and there wasn't really much to do unless you wanted to drive at least 35 minutes to the closest city. If you went up for the drive, one of the popular things to do was watch sunsets by the large river that ran along the country line. One day my best friend and I decided to go down to the river and take some pictures of the sunset. We drove through one of the towns and down a short yet steep road that opened up into a gravel parking lot. There was one other car there and no one had been seen, so we figured we had looked out. As a side note, people normally park and either walk along the river or take their boats out, so we didn't think anything of it. We started taking pictures of the river as the sun is setting, and I hop onto the railroad tracks running parallel to the water to get a picture of an old railroad crossing sign. All of a sudden this guy jumps out of a bush near the railroad tracks to let me know that a train is coming. I look over and see a train light in the distance, so I hop off the tracks and thank him for the warning. This guy looked like he was in his early 20s and he was very handsome. He had olive skin and, if I was to guess, I would say he had some Middle Eastern heritage like me. His accent was thick and sounded like he was from some European country that I couldn't identify. I'd like to say that was the first thing I noticed, but no. It was the fucking sniper rifle he was holding in his hand. Scope and everything. Now, I might not know much about guns, but I've played enough Call of Duty to know a sniper rifle when I see it. I look over at my friend and I can tell she's getting nervous. The guy starts making small talk, asking us where we are from. I didn't want to tell him I was from a few towns over, so I told him we were from the town we were in. I asked him where he was from, assuming he was going to tell me he was a student at the well-known liberal arts college down the road that attracts international students. Nope, he said he was visiting the area. As he's talking, he's just casually spinning around the rifle in his hands. I start feeling like this guy could actually kill us. There was no one else around and the sun was setting. While I'm having a silent freak out and I sense my friend is having the same, I start thinking of excuses to get the fuck out of there. My brain decided that the best solution was to tell him that I needed to meet my dad at the station because we were going out for dinner. He asked what my dad did and I said he was a cop. I figured that if he knew someone was expecting us, especially someone in law enforcement, he wouldn't try anything. He believed us and we ran to the car and drove away as fast as possible. I don't know why, but I didn't even think to call the police. Instead, I just brushed it off as a creepy encounter. I didn't question why the guy was hiding in the bushes with a sniper rifle when it wasn't large game hunting season, plus the area wasn't wooded enough for anyone to hunt there. A week or so goes by and by, then I forgot about it, until I saw a headline in the local newspaper. Police caught a handful of suspected armed terrorists in their 20s. They were all from places in Europe and were caught by the river in the same small town I had met that guy. I felt my stomach sink and I couldn't finish the article. I didn't want to know if these guys were planning on an attack because I could have done something sooner. Edit. I texted my best friend to ask if she remembered this and she said it happened in July of that year. I looked through our friendship on Facebook and sure enough she was right. The wall posts must have been from the day after. Anyway, that's the only proof I have since I wasn't stupid enough to take the picture of the guy holding the gun.